Greetings, everyone. My name is Emily Louie, and on behalf of Campbell and Company, I would like to welcome you to our second webinar in our Auditing Your Online Fundraising webinar series, which will be focusing on email. Thanks for joining us today. Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to quickly go through some logistics for those of you who may be new to our webinars. First, please close any programs other than GoToWebinar that are running on your computer. Next, we recommend calling in with a telephone instead of using your computer speakers. And if you experience any visual issues, please send a chat to Campbell and Company or contact GoToWebinar at the number on your screen. Today's webinar is being recorded and will last 30 minutes. Within the next 24 hours, you will receive an email from GoToWebinar that includes information on how to access the recording and download today's slides. Because this is a shorter webinar, we won't be taking live audience questions, but we do encourage you to email our presenter, Kelsey, with any questions you have. We'll be sharing contact information before we conclude today. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our presenter today, fundraising consultant, Kelsey Nelson.
Thanks so much, Emily. Again, my name is Kelsey Nelson, and I'm a fundraising consultant here at Campbell and Company. I'm based out of our Chicago office, and I have the pleasure with working with organizations to advance fundraising programs and campaigns across the Chicago area and the Midwest. Before joining the firm 4 years ago, I worked in annual giving at the University of Michigan, and I've kept my passion for broad-based fundraising alive here at Campbell, in part by co-leading our online fundraising team, which works to apply development and communications best practices to the wide world of digital engagement. In today's half-hour session, I'm going to open with some context and data around online and email fundraising, talk about segmentation and personalization, move on to calls to action, commonly called CTAs, and conclude with some tips for formatting and functionality. And as Emily mentioned, this is only a 30-minute session, so it's going to be pretty high level, but I hope to give you all some checklists and tools that can really be helpful moving forward, and certainly invite any follow-up afterwards for those of you who want to dig deeper. So let's get started with context and data. On this slide is a quote from Sherlock Holmes. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. I always like to begin discussions about online fundraising with data, both because, like Mr. Holmes, I believe it to be the basis of all good ideas, and because so often in development we are asked to make the case for why an investment of resources into an emerging channel is warranted. I hope some of the data points I picked out to share with you can help you advocate for why your organization might be wise to invest more time and thought into online fundraising, including our focus today, your fundraising email. So first up, these are stats from Blackbaud's 2019 Charitable Giving Report, which included a little over 5,200 nonprofits in their analysis. In 2019, online giving grew 6.8% year over year, while overall giving grew just 1%. Approximately 8.7% of total fundraising revenue was raised online, and small nonprofits continue to show largest year-over-year growth in this metric. So online giving is growing at a much faster rate than overall giving. And while online giving still represents less than 10% of total fundraising, consider that e-commerce sales currently account for about 10% of total sales in this country. Consumer behavior in the U.S. aligns really closely with donor behavior. So if you bet that e-commerce is going to continue to grow, you should also assume that online giving will too. Next, I want to share some findings from M&R's Benchmarks 2020. These numbers are for the 2019 calendar year and represent a sampling of just over 200 organizations. So of this group, for the first time ever in 2019, organizations reported a 1% increase in email fundraising response rates. Open rates increased by 9%, and click-through rates, which measure the rate of users who click on a specific link in the email to the total number of users who view the email, increased by 22%. This all was balanced by a 19% dip in page completion rates, which measure the percentage of users who actually read through that full message, as opposed to bouncing before reaching the call to action. In this time, organizations saw a 3% jump in email revenue per 1,000 fundraising emails spent year over year. So this moved up to $45. Note that email revenue per 1,000 fundraising emails varies greatly by sector, with public media nonprofits generating the highest return at $124 per 1,000 messages. Email messaging last year accounted for 16% of all online revenue, down from 18% in 2018. But some sectors, again, have a much higher share of online revenue coming from email. So for example, email accounts for 26% of cultural organizations' online revenue. Finally, email list size decreased by 2%, and the number of email messages per subscriber declined in volume by 2.1%, down to 50 emails per subscriber. On average, 22 of those 50 messages were fundraising appeals, 11 were newsletters, and 7 were advocacy messages. So the main takeaways here. Last year, organizations culled their email lists and slightly reduced the volume of emails they sent. They saw higher open rates, click-through rates, and response rates, and more revenue per email. So it makes sense that the more strategic you get with your list, the higher the return on investment you should see. But you still need to send a lot of emails to make money, as evidenced by the $45 per 1,000 emails sent stat. So finally, I want to share some data from Next After Institute's Coronavirus Nonprofit Fundraising Response, which is a handy source for information on what's happened so far this year. They analyzed 6,620 emails from 160 nonprofits that were received between January 1st and August 27th of this year. And what they found really shows how crucial email has been to fundraising efforts during the pandemic. They observed a steady increase in email volume that was primarily driven by messaging that referenced COVID-19. In mid-April, 72.8% of all messages referenced COVID-19, and that began to decline in late May and had been reduced to about 40% by late August. Email volume is, again, widely variable based on sector. For example, public policy and international organizations have been sending more than twice as much email as sectors such as education and arts and culture. Roughly half of all emails in this time period included some form of a solicitation, and this number spiked around Giving Tuesday Now in May, when about 72% included an ask. Here too, there's wide variance on sector. Those on the front lines of the pandemic, such as health, human services, and public policy, have been sending more solicitations than any other message type, while other sectors seem to be prioritizing cultivation. One thing I've seen a lot of my clients do is start to include what I would call a soft ask in more of their regular e-communications. So this might be a sentence about supporting the organization in a time of need, and then a donate button at the bottom of their weekly email update, or a regular feature on philanthropy's role in sustaining the organization in a monthly or quarterly e-newsletter. So if you need convincing that email is an important part of your organization's fundraising toolbox, especially this year, hopefully that helps. And I want to move on now to talk about a few ways you can assess and begin to improve your fundraising email. Let's start with a poll that Emily is going to bring up for us. So the question is, does your organization deliver personalized and compelling email to your subscribers? Here are the choices. 1, emails are one-size-fits-all with little personalization. 2, emails include recipient names and personal sender names. 3, emails are highly customized based on segments and personas. Or D, I don't know. So I'll give you all a minute to respond to that. All right, so this is small on my screen, but I'm trying to bring it up. It looks like about 55% of you said emails include recipient names and personal sender names. Around 26% emails are one-size-fits-all with little personalization. And then about 17% emails are highly customized based on segments, personas. Okay, so across the board, but most of you are somewhere in the middle. You're including recipient names, you're personalizing or sending from a specific person. Great. All right. So why is it important to think about segmentation? It's critical to remember that your supporters are all individuals, and they support your cause for a variety of reasons in a variety of ways. Segmentation is about making sure you send the right content to the right people at the right frequency. So it's beyond just making sure that, a first name is in there and that it's coming from someone specific. It's about how do you make somebody feel seen and understood. Whenever possible, you should speak to your supporters in a way that recognizes their personal connection and history with your organization. So if they gave to a specific program or fund, you want to share information with them about those things. If they've given previously, recognize their support when you follow up. And I would say if you don't currently segment your email communications, the easiest and most common way to do it is to do it based on donor behavior. So you might decide to send current and prior year donors one message, lapsed donors another, and non-donors one more. I would say this is the bare minimum and encourage you to think about other ways to slice and dice your audiences and create tailored messaging, which could be based on things like age or generation, geographic location, connection to the organization, and recent engagement with your work. One thing that can be tremendously helpful in segmenting and personalizing messaging is creating donor personas. So persona is a consolidation of target audience data into a single fictional character designed to represent that target audience and inform fundraising, marketing, or design processes and decisions. Personas are something that marketing companies use all the time, but we think it works just as well in fundraising. And we like to say that a fundraising persona is an answer to the question, who are our donors, in the form of a single document that's easy to read, reference, and understand. So on the left side of this slide is an example of a persona that we built for a fictional university. You see a picture of a smiling young woman in her early 30s wearing a blazer and glasses. This is emerging leader Ellen. We sketched out a bio for her that tells us she graduated from Anytown U 10 years ago with a BBA and now works for a Fortune 500 company. In addition to more details about her bio, there are sections on her demographics, her life goals, how to spot an emerging leader Ellen among alumni, as well as the challenges of engaging people like her as a volunteer or donor. There are lots of different formats you can use to create personas, but this gives you an idea of some of the specific ways we like to bring them to life. Why use personas? Because it's easier to wrap your head around what one user thinks than it is to wrap your head around what all users think, especially when that one user is designed exclusively for the purpose of representing the group. And for nonprofits, thinking in terms of personas prevents the common pitfall of targeting donors based on what you or your organization wants, as opposed to what donors might be interested in. So building a persona for each target group helps you match your perspective with theirs. And if you have donor personas, as you craft your fundraising emails throughout the year, you should ask yourselves which of them would be engaged by each communication or solicitation you plan to send. You won't be able to target all of your personas with a single email or campaign, but you should try to strike some sort of balance, making sure you're offering each one of those personas multiple points of engagement throughout the year that you think will be especially appealing to them. And if you want to know more about how to create personas, again, you can send me an email after this session. I'd be happy to share some additional resources with you. All right. So if you couldn't tell, creating a segmentation plan is my #1 recommendation to you for improving your email fundraising. Now let's zoom out a little and look at the first of 3 checklists I want to share with you today. This is your overall Am I on the Right Track email checklist. There are 7 items on it. Number 1, strong message and sense of urgency. Read through your recent fundraising email. Do you have a clear case for support? You want to make sure you aren't trying to accomplish too many goals at once. Each email should really have one simple story and a clear purpose. Number 2, compelling subject line. Your subject line is key to getting people to open up your email. Subject line testers are a great resource for validating your thoughts, and there's one we like on the screen here, emailsubjectlinegrader.com. Using a tool like this will allow you to check for spam triggers, get suggestions for making your subject lines more emotive, and get an overall grade on how clickable your emails are. I also really like to suggest A/B testing subject line. It's a really good way to learn a little bit about what entices your audience to open an email. Number 3 is appealing and evocative images. So the right images in an email can remind your audience what they love about your organization and really put a face to that communication. Number 4 is clear CTAs or calls to action. And because CTAs are so important, we have an entire checklist just for them, so hold tight on that. Number 5 is easy to give. Ideally, your email is only 2 clicks away from completing a gift. So we'll talk about this more in a few slides as well, but the takeaway here is to test your donation page, or better yet, have a friend or colleague from outside your organization test it, and I guarantee that you'll learn about some points of friction and perhaps some ways to make it easier for folks to give. Number 6 is mobile optimized. You want to make sure you use mobile-friendly email templates. So email programs like Constant Contact and MailChimp make it easy for you to do this, but it's always a good idea to test periodically. And then number 7 is match for support. This isn't necessarily advisable for every email solicitation, but it can be really effective in special campaigns like your Giving Tuesday or maybe your year-end campaign. And a double your impact model works well, but there are many other ways to get creative with matching challenges. Finally, this isn't on the slide, but I urge you to keep it simple. The most effective email designs are easy to read and digest. They look great in all browsers, on all devices. They have a simple color palette. And I would just suggest that after you write the first draft of any email, try to cut the word count in half. This is really always true, but especially in 2020, no one has the attention span for a page-long message. So another data point for you here is from Bitable. Including video and emails can boost click rates by as much as 300%. I especially like to encourage the use of video in stewardship emails or in cultivation emails. Short, poignant videos can help show, not tell donors the impact of your gifts and offer a really clever way to cut down on text length. People will stay tuned for a little bit longer if you give them something to watch and listen than they will if you give them just text. And I have a couple examples to show to you today. So I pulled from my personal life. This is an example of a thank you video I received from my alma mater after giving to a winter donor challenge. And an alumni volunteer recorded this quick video emphasizing how much she appreciated her fellow alums joining her in supporting students. So what you see on the screen on the left side of the page is an email that includes a short message. It says, "Hi Kelsey, thank you for supporting Middlebury." There's a CTA button underneath that in a color that pops, which says, "Watch your video" in all caps. And then there's an image of an envelope with my first name on it, a return address with the college's name impressed, and a stamp featuring an image of the campus. So then when you click on the CTA, it redirects to a web page. You see a still from on the right with a 2-minute video from the chair of the alumni committee and a text saying, "Thank you for giving to Middlebury this year. In these difficult times, your generosity gives us strength and allows us to care for our Middlebury community." So this is an example of a touch point that you could think about adding to an existing campaign, whether it's something you send to a specific segment or to all donors during a flash campaign or giving day. And it's also just a great example of how to treat email as it should be treated, with very little text, lots of personalization, and eye-catching imagery or video. It's not a form letter. It's not an email version of the direct mail piece. It's a simple message that asks little of the recipient, and it feels high touch without being extremely time intensive. So I just showed you an example of a CTA in use, and I want to dig in a little more. But first, Emily's going to bring up one more poll for us. So this poll reads, how well does your organization use call to action buttons or links in your emails to drive gifts and engagement? The options are: 1, emails are lengthy and do not regularly feature a CTA. 2, emails have CTAs, but they can be hard to find or interpret. 3, emails contain conveniently placed CTAs with action verbs. And 4, I don't know. All right, so it looks like about, if I'm reading that right, most of you, about 59%, said emails contain conveniently placed CTAs with action verbs. About 21% said emails have CTAs, but they can be hard to find or interpret. And a smaller percentage, 13, said emails are lengthy and don't regularly feature a CTA. Okay, great. I'm really, really encouraged to know that the majority of you are using CTA as well. So hopefully these next slides will be helpful for those of you who might not be using them well so far, but I'd also encourage you to think about testing, even if you think you do it well right now. Again, A/B tests for things like CTAs can be really revealing. So here's your second checklist of the day, the All Things CTA checklist. There are 6 items on it. Number 1, use a button to highlight a CTA. This is a simple addition that can increase your click-through rate by 28% over a simple link. And I will confess, I have started even using buttons in my emails to my colleagues when I want them to go to a link and do something. It's pretty easy to place one in, even if you're using something like Outlook. So it's not too tricky. Number 2, make your button large but not obnoxious and readable. Users often have a distaste, whether conscious or unconscious, for threateningly large lettering, so make sure your button text is big enough to draw attention to, but don't go overboard. Trust your gut. Number 3, use action-oriented text and words that create urgency. They're called calls to action for a reason. Even adding a simple intensifier like now or today can boost your click-through rate. Number 4 is experiment with using the first person. So this might be something that you could try, even if you're using CTAs pretty well right now, if you haven't done it yet. Research has shown that this too can result in higher clicks. And an example of this would be to change your CTA from make your donation to make my donation. Number 5 is to place at least one of the CTAs above the fold or above the scroll. So you want to make sure there's one near the top of your email so users don't have to scroll down to get to it. Just in the same way that you really want to make sure there's a donate button on your website that folks don't have to scroll down to get to. And then number 6, use bright and contrasting colors. So button color matters. You want something that's eye-catching without being too distracting. And please keep in mind, folks with visual impairments, one good rule to remember is to avoid using red and green together. Also be sure to include some extra white space around your call to action buttons. That helps create a visual break and draws the user's attention right where you want it. One more thing to keep in mind is that sometimes you'll have links to other images you'll have other links, images, or buttons in your email that aren't the main call to action. And just remember that your entire goal of your email is to get somebody to click on your most important CTA. So if it's really about getting people to the donate page, you want to make sure that any other details or links take a back seat. And one option would be to try using grayscale buttons or maybe a complementary color that's a little less bold for any secondary CTA. So to show you a few more examples, these are images of 2 email solicitations I received a few years ago from the ACLU. In both, you see multiple sentences that are in bolded blue font and underlined, which differentiates them from the black text of the message. These are link-based CTAs, but there's also a red button in each one that says donate now in all caps. Your eye is drawn to these even more because the red stands out from the blue and black color scheme in the email. And just to note, all of these lead to the same place. They're all going to the donation page, so they're not really competing with one another. They're just giving you multiple ways to get to the destination. So our last order of business today is to talk about formatting and functionality. And this is my final data point for you. This is again from Blackbaud's 2019 Charitable Giving Report. An estimated 26% of online transactions in 2019 were made using a mobile device. This is an increase of 2% over 2018 and a continuation of steady growth since 2014, when mobile transactions accounted for just 9% of online donations. I can tell you that for some organizations, this percentage is closer to 50%, and it's growing. And I share this because it underlines an item from the first checklist, that email should be mobile optimized. And it also ties into the importance of the third and final checklist I have for you. So this is the test, and then test some more checklist. And there are 6 items on it. Number 1 is check your links. Please make sure none of your links are broken. Broken links are the ultimate frustration for users. Number 2 is you want to verify that the email displays correctly in different browsers and on different devices. It's always a good idea to check on desktop, mobile, and tablet, and on different operating systems like Apple and Android. And depending on whatever email system you're using, it might do some of that for you. You probably know how comfortable you are with how the email displays. But I would still say if you're doing something like, a Giving Tuesday appeal or year-end appeal that's going to your whole database, that's really a much wider audience than it sometimes is, it's always a good idea to test, even if you're pretty sure that it looks good. Number 3 is to, through that testing, detect and fix any formatting issues, of course, like line breaks or different size fonts. And my recommendation here is just involve multiple people in the QA process of your email so that nothing slips by. Number 4, ensure that alt text is provided for any images. So alt text is the written copy that appears in place of an image if it fails to load on a user's screen. And in addition to helping with loading issues, it allows screen reading tools to describe images to visually impaired readers. So it's really important to have that in place to caption all of your images. Number 5 is check for typos and readability. You can use a number of tools for this. One that we like is app.readable.com. And then number 6, check to make sure that your merge fields are working. So of course you want to make sure that you're testing out the email with real data in it, sending test versions to yourself or your colleagues. So this brings us to the end of our session on auditing your organization's fundraising emails. Again, it was pretty high level, so if you want to dig in deeper, you can check out our other sessions on auditing your online fundraising series. The first one on website and donation pages is recorded and can be accessed on our website or YouTube channel. And the third and final session on social media is coming up on Thursday, November 12th at 1:30 Central. You can also take our 6-minute assessment to get a sense for your organization's overall fundraising efforts using this link on the slide, bit.ly/digital-quiz. And again, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to field them. Send me an email at kelsey.nelson@campbellcompany.com. We'll also check out any questions that may have popped up in the chat, and I'll get back to you. Thanks so much for your time, and I'll turn it back to Emily if she has any closing statements.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelsey, and thank you all for joining us today. Like I said, you'll be receiving a copy of the recording and today's slides and a follow-up email from GoToWebinar. Thanks so much.